Now, the next team that we got to talk about are the Pittsburgh Steelers. And as a Steelers fan, watching this offense for the last 4 years has been torture for my damn eyes. It's like this offense has been so bad. It's been times when I've watched Steeler games, this offense will come on the field. I'll go to the kitchen to grab me something to drink. And then I come back 45 seconds later, and the defense is right back on the damn field. And it wasn't because of turnovers, because they went 3-0. Now, this offense should be way better this season than what it has been in previous years, but I still have my concerns. You hire Arthur Smith as your offensive coordinator. Now, he's been the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons for the past couple of years, and it didn't work out there. And it wasn't because he was a bad play caller. It more so is that his problem is he tries to outthink the room. Like, he tries to make things way more complicated than what it has to be. Like, you had Kyle Pitts, Drake London, and B. John Robinson, but instead of utilizing your best playmakers on offense, you're utilizing your backup tight end and Jonnu Smith. That was just really weird to me. But when he was the offensive coordinator under Mike Vrabel for the Tennessee Titans, that year they had upset Baltimore in the divisional round when they had Ryan Tannehill and Derrick Henry chugging along. Ryan Tannehill posted his career best numbers under Arthur Smith's tutelage. And I think that Arthur Smith is probably the best offensive coordinator that the Steelers have had since Todd Haley, because once they fired Todd Haley, they had Randy Fichtner, who only was hired because Ben Roethlisberger liked him, and that was Big Ben's guy. And then once you parted ways with him, you promoted Matt Canada from within, and we all know that Matt Canada should have never been calling the plays. This dude looked like a novice when he was calling the plays for the Pittsburgh Steelers offense the past 2 years. Arthur Smith is going to be a breath of fresh air as the offensive coordinator in Pittsburgh. His scheme is all about running the football and utilizing play action, which works out well for the talent that the Steelers have in place. Quarterback is where my biggest concern lies with this team. You got to pick between either old man Russell Wilson or Justin Fields. Now, me personally, I'd rather see Justin Fields out there. I get that he is really slow going through his progressions, but I think that he's no worse than a passer than what Russell Wilson is, because Russell Wilson is 5'10", so he can't throw in the middle of the field. He can't see over the offensive line. A lot of the throws with Russell Wilson is going to be outside of the numbers. And when you start somebody like Russell Wilson, you have to build the offense around him. He's not one of those guys that you just plug and play into your system. No, your system becomes the Russell Wilson system. And the problem with that is that the dude is so old, a lot of his game was built off him getting outside the pocket and him running around just making a bunch of plays, but he doesn't have that kind of athleticism anymore to be able to invade defensive linemen like how he used to and run away from guys. So he's going to have to become way more comfortable throwing from within the pocket, which hasn't really been a strong suit the last couple of years for him. Justin Fields, I believe that even if you don't get as good as a passer as what you would get out of Russell Wilson, he has potential to make the Steelers' running game one of the best in the National Football League this year, because he's one of the best dual-threat quarterbacks that we've had in the league for over the last decade, all right? And Justin Fields can always improve. That's why the Steelers made that trade to get him, because you still have a young player that has a lot of upside. The reason why Chicago traded him wasn't because the dude was completely trash. They traded him because he still is fairly unknown. Going into his 5th season in the league, we still don't know what he is, and Chicago wasn't willing to gamble on that when he had the opportunity to draft Caleb Williams, a generational QB prospect. But if they didn't have that number 1 pick that they got blessed with from the Carolina Panthers, Justin Fields probably still would have been the starting quarterback in Chicago right now. So it's not like Justin Fields is damaged goods. It's all about if Arthur Smith and Mike Tomlin can find a way to develop Justin Fields as a passer. And they've already have tweaked some things with his mechanics. Like, I read something the other night about how they got him leading with his right foot instead of leading with his left foot, which was unnatural for him. Luke Getsy started making him do that. Now Justin Fields is back throwing the football in the way that he's more comfortable with, which should help him improve a tad bit. I'm not going to act like I'm a QB guru, but he said that, he wasn't comfortable leading with his left foot. Him throwing with his right foot is the way he's been throwing the football his whole entire life. So I would like to think that that's the start in the right direction for him. But outside of the quarterback position, there's a lot to like about Pittsburgh's offense. You look at the running back unit, you got one of the best running back duos in the league with Najee Harris and Jalen Warren. Najee Harris is in the contract year. The Steelers declined his fifth-year option, and he's not bad, all right? He's not a bust. It's just that he hasn't played up to the level that you expect from a first-round running back, excuse me. When you draft the running back in the first round, you're expecting Ezekiel Elliott, Saquon Barkley. You're expecting him to have a lot of juice, and Najee Harris he hasn't really displayed that. But he is coming off a career high in yards per attempt at 4.1. He had 8 touchdowns, and he had another 1,000-yard season, which having a 1,000-yard season as a running back is incredibly overrated now, because if you do the math, all you got to do is have around 55, 60 rushing yards per game, and you can get to 1,000 yards. And he did get outplayed by Jalen Warren. To me, Jalen Warren is the most complete back on the Steelers roster. He's faster, quicker burst, and he has way better vision. He also is a way bigger factor in the passing game. And there was times when this offense was running through Jalen Warren. The only time they could sustain a little bit of efficiency was when they were putting the ball in his hands. So to me, Jalen Warren should be the RB1 for Pittsburgh this year. But of course, they're going to go with Najee Harris because he does have bigger size. He's way more physical, and he's just a throwback Pittsburgh Steelers running back. But it doesn't hurt that they got 2 really good running backs. You also did sign Cordell Patterson to a 2-year deal in free agency, who already is familiar with Arthur Smith's system and his offense. And I expect him to have a little bit of a role on this offense in some capacity, rather he be lining up in the slot or if he's returning kicks. Because, the NFL, they have that new kickoff rule. For those of you guys who don't know, the kickoffs that we've been so accustomed to all these years are no longer. It's going to be similar to how they do the kickoffs in the UFL. So I think that you're probably going to see Cordell Patterson used like that. Now, another concern that I have with the Steelers offense outside of the quarterback position is wide receiver. Because you have George Pickens and then who else behind him? All right, now we know that George Pickens is a stud, but I feel like them trading away Deontay Johnson was a mistake because he was clearly the Steelers' second best wide receiver. And I think that Steeler fans took him for granted because it's very hard to find receivers that are really good at getting open, running great routes, and creating separation. All those things that Deontay Johnson did well, and the Steelers didn't find a suitable replacement for him. I mean, they got Van Jefferson, who hasn't done anything noteworthy since his second season with the Rams. He played for the Falcons last year, and we didn't even hear his name called like that. And then they got a bunch of slot receivers. You got Calvin Austin, Scotty Miller, Quez Watkins. You got rookie Roman Wilson, who you drafted in the 3rd round out of Michigan this year. Now, he's nice. I like Roman Wilson's game. He's not a great route runner, but he's decent enough that, with a few years in this system, he can improve. And the Steelers always have a really good track record when it comes to drafting receivers in the draft. So I think Roman Wilson can be a really good player. I just don't know how effective he could be as an outside number 2 guy. But looking at this receiver room, you can obviously tell the kind of offense that Arthur Smith is going to be running. It's going to be play action heavy, getting that run game going, and then trying to bomb guys over the top because you got a lot of guys who can take the top off the defense. It's just that you don't have too many chain movers. And George Pickens, I don't look at him as a chain mover per se. I see him more as a big play guy also, somebody who you just throw the football up to downfield and he just goes up and gets it. Deontay Johnson is severely going to be missed. I'm really concerned about the Steelers wide receiver room this year. Although they do have a good track record of developing wide receivers, they only drafted 1 this year. Tight end, Pat Freiermuth, is going to be in for a big season this year. He must have a big season because he clearly is the number 2 option in this passing game. Now, he was expected to have a breakout season in 2023, but he got held back because of poor play calling and poor quarterback play. Now that you have either Justin Fields or Russell Wilson starting at QB, and you're going to have Arthur Smith calling the plays, Arthur Smith utilizes his tight ends a lot in the passing game. Kyle Pitts, he didn't have the best numbers, but it's not like he didn't use them at all. And then you also had Jonnu Smith. And we probably are going to see a lot of 2 tight end sets. You're going to see a lot more of Darnell Washington. Now, Darnell Washington, I don't know if he's going to be a bigger factor in the passing game this year than what he was his rookie season. When he was coming out of Georgia, you got to remember, this dude wasn't really known for his impact in the passing game. He was known as somebody who just was a big mauler in the run game, and then sometimes, if you give him the ball in space, he'll run a couple of guys over because of how freakishly athletic he is. But Connor Hayward, to me, could be that second tight end that could emerge in this offense as a factor in the passing game for Pittsburgh this year, because I think that he does have a pretty good skill set that translates well to him being a good pass-catching tight end. He's not as good as a blocker as what Darnell Washington or either Pat Freiermuth is, but there definitely could be a role for Connor Hayward. Hell, if Arthur Smith can find a role for freaking Jonnu Smith, he can definitely find a way to utilize Connor Hayward. Now, this offensive line is what has me excited the most. Now, a lot of people don't care about the big uglies up front unless it's just a unit that's just completely terrible. The Steelers have rebuilt this offensive line. They spent a lot of draft capital on this offensive line the past 3 years, and I think this is the season that it all comes together. You got 2 first-round picks at offensive tackle, Broderick Jones, and then Troy Fautanu, who they spent their first-round pick out of Washington on in this past year's draft. Troy Fautanu was part of one of the best offensive lines in all of college football. They won the Joe Moore Award, which goes to the most outstanding offensive line in college football. And then you got Isaac Samalu at offensive guard, James Daniels. But don't sleep on Mason McCormick. If Isaac Samalu gets injured or he underperforms this season, Mason McCormick definitely can come in. He was a 4th-round pick from this past year's draft also, and I like this guy a lot. Big, nasty, got a lot of attitude, and you draft center Zach Frazier also. So, they went heavy on the offensive line. They drafted 3 offensive linemen, which all these guys are good enough to start day one. Zach Frazier, personally, was my favorite selection out of the 3 offensive linemen that they took. He was arguably the best center in the draft, talking to a lot of people that covered the draft. He was a 2nd-round pick, and he's nasty, physical. He should be a really good run blocker. He has a wrestling background. So technically, this offensive line is as good as what it's been since the last, 4 or 5 years. The last time the Steelers had an offensive line that looked remotely as good as what it does on paper right now was like 2016 and 2017. Now, overall, when I think of the Steelers offense, it doesn't look that good on paper. It's going to be one of those offenses that it's going to be boring to watch. They're going to be playing smash mouth football, and then they're going to throw the football sparingly, but I definitely think it can work. This is the Steelers brand of football, and this offense doesn't need to be anything special. All they just need to be is better than what they have looked the last 4 years, bro, because it's been a struggle for the Steelers offensively to even get the freaking 20 points the last couple of years. I think this season, with you having Arthur Smith, you actually have somebody who knows what he's doing as the OC, somebody who actually knows how to set up plays and knows how to maximize the best that he has, or the best that he has to work with. The wide receivers aren't that good, but you got Pat Freiermuth, who's going to be more of a factor this year, and Roman Wilson, he should be good enough to make a couple of necessary plays for the Steelers to move the chains with how good he is at getting open downfield. And then we know what George Pickens is capable of. The only thing that really is the big knock on this unit is the QB position, bro. Honestly, I know I was complaining about the wide receivers, but quarterback really scares me the most. When you're in the division with Lamar and Joe Burrow, and then if Deshaun Watson ever wakes the hell up, I think the Steelers are going to be in a lot of trouble. And I don't think that with how difficult this schedule is, Mike Tomlin can continue to sustain these winning seasons without getting some competent quarterback play. So whichever QB is able to step up, rather it be Justin Fields or Russell Wilson, you're going to need one of those guys to play at a top 15 or better level if the Steelers are going to be able to have success this year. But overall, this is a way better offense at least on paper and with who they have calling the plays, than what it's been in previous years.